The benchmarking workgroup meeting for July 9th. Sorry, I started a little bit late, so a bit of a recap. Present we have Corbin Uselton, Michael Dawson, Ali Sheik, Yosurke Farwaka, Yang Zhou, Trevor Norris, and we've gone through the first agenda item, which was to review and discuss some of the issues opened on the GitHub project. And we're just covering the last issue there. So I'm going to open up the last one, which was opening around. Was opened to discuss benchmarking dependencies. And again, I think that one was suggesting along the lines of, adding V8 to the list of benchmarks that we should be running for Node just as another baseline. So, Octane is an example, but if there are other ones for other JavaScript engines, if those get supported sometime in the future. So I think discussion was already that it sounds like that's a good thing to do. We should just add to the list of the goals that we have to get done. So that was the list of GitHub issues. The next thing I have on the agenda was Yunnan was going to cover the Restify React benchmarks. I guess give us a little bit of an introduction to them and then start a discussion.
Sure, yeah. So we, for most of our production services, we use Restify as the HTTP framework, and then for anything that has to render out a UI that's not like a backend service, we actually leverage React quite a bit. So, I mean, I've done some benchmarking on Restify, like just simple stuff with AD, but it would be great to leverage the same set of tooling and tool sets that we can use for like Happy or Express or any of these other frameworks, so we get an idea of where we're lacking a performance, where we stack up, to improve performance on that aspect. And then with React, it's so for those of you who aren't familiar, React is a sort of UI framework, and it renders like markup and all that stuff. And it wasn't really meant for the server, right? So we're using it in V8 on Node to do a bunch of server-side rendering. And so we've been having some sort of performance issues with React. Not in terms of like React is slow. It's more just rendering takes us a lot longer than we would expect. And so it would be great to sort of come up with a set of benchmarks for React and maybe some other UI frameworks out there like Dust or whichever other ones that exist, and sort of really figure out where we're spending all the time on CPU. Part of the problem with rendering is you're doing a bunch of string rendering, and that blocks the entire CPU. It's pretty critical. So those are the two sort of frameworks that we use in production at sort of the scale that we're seeing, so it would be great to get some insight into that.
Right, so I think oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I should have asked for an issue too. I thought we were going to cover the issues that Trevor opened on the different frameworks. So I kind of mentioned that I'm forming an Elastic architect UI stuff and building a demo to show possibly that in Happy that's kind of a
can everybody else go on mute?
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Thanks. But so basically, that would let us, or will let me do elastic scaling, and I thought it might work well actually for these. So for example, that if Netflix wanted to then port that to Restify, then all they have to do is swap out the main Docker container, and they can say, okay, it's the same API, only it's in Restify. Swap that out, spin up 100 of them, and a bunch of load generating nodes, and it would run any sort of Docker swarm. It runs on Triton, and it runs on a laptop if you only spin up a couple nodes. So I don't know if that would work for you. I was also thinking of doing an Ember.js front end, so it would be a perfect example of where you guys could do a separate container that's doing view testing, on generating the views in React versus Ember, and then I was thinking of also making sure the container was capable of sending performance data live from it into Graylog, which would also be set up by the by the cluster, and then also to generate flame graphs and stuff out of the node Docker containers. But I didn't know if that sounded like something that would be useful to everybody else. This is just something I'm already building. So.
Yeah, that would be great actually. That'd be really easy to plug into frameworks like ours or anyone else's. That's an awesome.
Yeah. So that's you just replace just the Node API Docker container or just the Node, static view Docker container, and then the idea would be you could probably pick even between a couple databases and be like, okay, I want to see this on Cassandra, I want to see this on Mongo, I want to see this on Couchbase, and that's kind of the idea.
Yeah. So just a quick question about that framework then. How are we ensuring that we're getting the same sort of performance from these containers across the different runs of the benchmarking suite or different frameworks? Are we going to be running them on the same cluster, on the same hardware?
Well, I guess the thought was that maybe there's a setup of specific hardware that's being done, but you could still even put your own stuff, put it on your own hardware, even with your own stuff privately, and just run it once on your own hardware with the one container that has, let's say, happy, and then run it again with the swapping in the container for Restify. So you could control them. Yeah, you'd have to say, okay, these two runs were specifically on the same hardware, but yeah, the idea was to make it super portable so that you guys could run them internally, do them publicly, do all that kind of stuff, and do it on a laptop, do it on a huge Docker swarm, and not have to worry about all the wraparound of setting it up. But I don't think that doesn't, unless you run them right with each other, designed to be matches to compare. Yeah, it's not going to be, if I run one on my laptop and then you run it on a giant Docker swarm, it's not going to be comparable.
Okay, that's cool. Do we think it might be helpful to have a public static sort of Docker set of Docker containers that we use to run like benchmarks for results we want to publish publicly? Because then they're sort of on equal footing. You get a good idea of, and then you do like an apples to apples comparison, right? Versus,
yeah.
So it's great to have the private stuff. Because a lot of the use cases you can't run that publicly. Internal APIs and stuff.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I guess my point is I wasn't going to set down, oh, well, it should be this. My point was more, if we as a group decide we want to figure that out, then we just need to say, okay, well, all of them run on, hypothetically, 6 AWS medium instances, or they all run on, Triton and exactly this, set of containers. I mean, that's just depends upon what everybody wants to use, but we could definitely set a standard that this is the normal for what we run against.
I think that's a good that's one good angle. I think another angle though is some people may want to run on different platforms, so allowing for that's probably important too.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Is the way I'm developing it is to be agnostic. Like I said, it started as purely a demo, and also internally how my company's scaling its architecture. So the idea would just be, from my standpoint, is it's compatible with Docker Swarm, it's compatible with Triton, it's compatible with boot to Docker on your local machine. You decide what hardware, but then what I'm saying is we as a group can then be much more specific about what the standard is for when we publish benchmarks.
Would there even be enough info to run without Docker at all?
What do you mean? I mean, I don't know. It's never been designed to run that way. No, not what I had. I mean, if somebody else wants to chime in on that, but that was. I mean, the Node application you build and all the databases run on bare metal. It just wouldn't. The point of using Docker was so that you didn't have to monkey with.
Sure.
Oh, I want to run a giant benchmark, but I don't want to figure out how I set up a 6-node Cassandra cluster to sit behind it.
Yeah.
I want to just be able to do Docker up. So yeah, I mean, if we want to make sure that the Node apps that run in the Node containers that we're benchmarking also run on bare metal, that's fine by me. I mean, there shouldn't be anything to limit that.
For those cases like you were saying, running Cassandra, wouldn't it be possible to basically write an interface that would just dump similar type of data, so that, I mean, essentially you'd be running a node process that imitates Cassandra, because depending on the setup, especially with I/O, in cases of I/O, your benchmarks are going to show latency on the pipe, right? And we want to reduce that as much as possible. And so getting them to run on the same box would be important.
Yes. If they're running in Triton, it shouldn't be an issue because there's straight networking between the containers. There's a full network stack, I think, at 1 gigabit a second. But we definitely could do, I mean, you could do a flat file database as a specifically, and even
You
if
could do like level DB or something on the box. But I mean, what's important for us, I think, is actually to be able to simulate a real-world workload. So synthetic mocking of databases is great too, but I think we definitely still want the option of being able to actually hit against production Cassandra or Mongo or whatever else.
when Couchbase already has a mock, as part of their lib for their SDK, they have a mock version of Couchbase written in pure JavaScript that you actually can run. So, I mean, if somebody else wants to write a more detailed specific for this option, but I would say that's definitely at least a short-term option. Just say, okay, if you run it as the Couchbase version, but you tell it to run against the mock, then it's going to run in memory and not against an actual database. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a worry is having too many other dependencies. For example, I mean, even within Node, with all the dependencies Node has, it'd be possible that we're running crypto benchmarks and then OpenSSL is upgraded or changes or something, and suddenly the performance changes in those crypto benchmarks, but it's not because of anything Node did, right? And so having all these external dependencies, we'd have to make sure that we maintain the same version, or if we do, it'd have to be documented. But then those benchmarks couldn't be 100% comparable to the previous benchmarks, right? It just adds a lot of complexity in trying to ascertain whether something has regressed or not when you start to introduce those external dependencies.
Isn't that also kind of the point, though, right? If we've updated OpenSSL, then I think we want to know that there's a regression caused by.
But the difference will be in the issues that we receive as maintainers, saying you screwed up our performance, fix it. Okay.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I think we should. I think that's a great point. We should definitely isolate the node-specific part of it and say hey, it's not us, right? This is your Cassandra driver got updated, and that's why you're slow. So totally agree with that. But I think it would be helpful for us as users, using instruction, to be able to see, hey, there are regressions, and there are regressions caused by updates to SSL or updates to your drivers or whatever it is, updates to the Linux kernel, right? Whatever it is. I think that would also be helpful. Just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think, at least to my thought, it just is showing that we need to make sure we don't just do these. I mean, this was just a scenario for doing real live, letting all of those complexities come into it because we still want information on that. Making sure that the majority of the benchmarks, especially the ones that are being run on the CI and stuff, to me, then yes, Trevor's right, should be totally closed box, not letting any of the rest of this get in. This was simply as the higher level after everything else is passed, okay, let's actually run real world scenarios and see what happens. And if it goes sideways, then we can ask those sort of questions like, okay, did something change? Can we look at it and see that the containers for the database are what are lagging, and we can see that the node container is hardly using any processor memory, so clearly it's some sort of choke point somewhere else, if that makes sense. But.
Okay. Also, just as a side note, based on this, running on many architectures, and not even just architectures, but running on VMs, like if we were to run on the Amazon cloud, is that there can be unexpected issues. For example, in Amazon there was an issue in libuv for a while where accessing the monotonic clock had to go through some syscall that made it 100 times slower on that exact, that precise Amazon stack versus everything else, right? And so running those benchmarks, you look like, holy crap, what's going on? Our performance sucks. When in reality, it was the actual VM that was messing things up.
Yeah, and the other thing is with Amazon or like any public cloud providers, depending on which instance you land on, what version of Zen they're running, your KVM, or hardware they're running, right? Not all instances of the same instance size are all created equal, so you're gonna get just for performance numbers anyway. So something to be just. It would be great if we had like a reserved set of clusters that we always use to do performance testing, because it means you're like Trevor was suggesting, reducing the number of variables, right? So we know that we're getting the same comparisons across the board.
Yeah, and I guess that was kind of my thought, was then it could be, so maybe it does need to be bare metal, that is what the actual official version is running on, but I would say that's even part of the benefit of this is if you could say all of a sudden that things seem to be slowing down when we run it on AWS, that one of the first things you could do is go, okay, what happens when I spin up an identical cluster in Triton? Has there been a regression? No, there hasn't, so is this something that's going on with AWS specifically? But not, like I said, not for the. I do see yes, definitely, that if we're publishing official and for the verification before like a significant release, that maybe then there needs to be some dedicated bare metal so that we're not worrying about other load happening on a specific cloud causing us issues.
Right. Do you have this framework that you're working on in GitHub anywhere or somewhere that we can take a look at?
You can see the starting of it in that, and I responded to that happy post for this group. That's what got me triggered on that. Okay. I was hoping to get a little more done earlier this week, but I've been doing it more internally as I've been getting my company's stuff running up on it. But hopefully this next week I should be able to turn back to it a little bit. But basically, yeah, the idea is it just uses console for service discovery, and so you can just say, okay, I want to Docker compose, and I want to, 5 Couchbase instances and 3, Node REST API framework instances, and then 2, traffic generators, and then console will bind all of them up and start the traffic. And then if you would say you want to, okay, I want to spin up a Graylog set of containers that then all these guys can dump all their performance information to. But then the point being, okay, somebody goes along and says, well, I hate Graylog, I want to use Logstash. That's fine. Just write the container and say why it's better, and we'll make it the default, that kind of thing.
Right. So I'm just thinking that, I don't know if it's at the point yet where like scheduling a meeting where you can give us a deep dive, or whether we just.
In about a week, I definitely could.
Okay, so maybe for the next benchmarking meeting, we could plan to have that on the agenda. That makes sense to everybody? I'd certainly be interested. Everybody else? Sounds good?
Yeah, I'd love to take a look at that. That would be great.
Okay. So yeah, I'll dig out the link from the other post, put it in the minutes, and then we'll plan for next meeting to have deep dive in next meeting. I'm back on the Restify and React. I'm wondering, is it, I think the first part would be to make sure we have those covered under our the benchmarking use cases. So do you think what we have there already covers those, or do we need to, like the rendering one sounds like it might be something more specific.
Yeah, is there a link to that? Let me just take a quick look.
Yeah, let me dig that up for a second.
I think I found it. So the 2 initial ones are front-end GUI, back-end services.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much what we do. Is we're building a couple of back-end services, and then obviously the site and devices, TV and all that's going to be running on Node, on React, rendering UIs. So those are kind of the 2.
Any chance you might be able to add a little more detail to those 2?
Yeah, let me do that. Let me make a note to add that. I'll just reply to the issue.
Okay, because and then if you do have benchmarks that you've already written to cover those use cases, I think we'd want to understand what they are and look at them as potential candidates.
Okay. I mean, we do a lot of fin graphs, and then we have a ton of metrics around where we're spending time on CPU, what we think we're spending time on CPU across each request.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can have those, and then also we just use really low bar stuff like Apache Bench, right? But it would be great
Okay.
to check out Corbin's framework in the next get some more stuff.
Yeah, I think that's good. If we look at that framework and also whatever you can share about how you're covering those use cases now, I think that's good input to what we might want to capture.
Sure, I'll add this to the issue.
Okay. So that was, we got into that in the agenda item for covering Rustify React. Anything more to say on that front before we move on?
I am good.
Okay, so let's go to coverage of modules. I think, again, that was Young. You had suggestions that we should also be looking at benchmarks for modules, right?
Yeah, and specifically, I'm super interested in stuff that deals with transport because there's big pushes around HTTP2, right, and WebSockets, and these like really core foundational modules that right now we just have no data on any of the modules, what the performance numbers look like. And I think, Trevor, it'd be good to find out from you in terms of the Node Core group whether there are plans to add HTTP2 and WebSocket support natively to the Node Core. Whether it, I think we definitely, even if that's going to happen, it might be a while. We definitely want to get some numbers out on the various. I know there's like tons of WebSockets frameworks out there, and there's a HTTP2 framework, so it'd be great to get some numbers around what the performance implications are, whether there are regressions. Right? That's really important before we roll that out to production to sort of get a bearing on those things. And I think it would be generally helpful for the community as a whole, right? Because I don't think there's really numbers out there right now around performance of those transport frameworks.
So sorry, for the notes you said HTTP2, what was the other one?
WebSockets.
WebSockets, right, okay. I guess generally the issue is that, yeah, for some, for key modules that are potentially outside of Node, it would still make sense to have some benchmarks and to track performance. Even, I guess, you could even you could look at it from the angle to make sure that Node doesn't regress performance of those modules, much less the modules regressing it themselves, right?
Yeah, exactly. The other one I think that in terms of transfer that would be helpful to look at is the server-side events. I'm sure there's quite a few modules out there as well, and it's stuff that's transport is really important, right? Because if that's sort of like the foundational layer really for writing services, so it'd be really great to get some numbers for those.
I mean, that sounds like that's another angle, goal that we could add in along with, we have the micro benchmarks, the use cases, and just general. Yeah, or is it? I'm just thinking as I speak. Is that another use case? So if we created some more benchmarking use cases that covered those specifically, that's maybe the good starting point to say we want to make sure we cover these cases, and then specifically we could identify which modules and stuff fit into those.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and I think we talked before, and it's been related to the discussion today as well, is that it would be nice to build these in a way where you can swap out modules so that, if there's two different ways to do the same thing, the same benchmark would help you cover both of those.
Yeah, an approach we could try as well, I'm not sure how valid it would be, is so where we have NPM modules that we know have significant numbers of users or dependent modules, we could reach out to the owners of those modules and ask them to generate performance tests that we would add to a regression bucket to make sure that we, as a node, don't regress the performance of those highly used modules.
Already working on that. It's actually the next topic. So, yes, good idea.
Okay, so I'll open another issue which reflects coverage for modules along with some of the discussion we've had, and we can take it from there, I think. That makes sense?
Yeah, sounds good. I can define that some of the modules that we'd like to get coverage
Okay.
on.
Okay, sounds good. So the next item is discussion of the investigation by Trevor. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I reached out to 4 that I thought would be good starting points just to see the kind of feedback I get and the kind of participation we would receive. Those include Happy, Kraken, Grunt, and Gulp. I tried to go like 2 TCP-based IO ones and 2 more file system ones where it has a lot of processing. Now with the Grunt and Gulp, I asked for benchmarks of like how they worked, and I asked for everything, and they gave me everything in the kitchen sink. Like the Gulp file is the biggest Gulp file I've ever seen in my life. And it also includes a lot of other modules and uses those as well, which I think is beneficial. Like this is basically, we can always scale it back, right? That's easier to do. But at least with this amount of information, it'll be easy to run, and I believe both these work on 10 all the way up to latest IOJS, so we can get a fairly good idea of how it's progressed since then. Now, as far as let's see, in Kraken, there was enthusiastic response, but nobody has provided anything. I think if I were to reach out and say, "Hey, we're ready," can we start getting some participation in generating these, that they would respond. But yeah, they've been enthusiastic about it. Now for Happy, nobody from, let's see, I don't know that project near as well. So I don't know if the dev who responded is part of like the Happy Core team or not. But he said he was working on.
That was me.
Well, that was you.
That was me. So that was the framework. I thought we were. I should have waited apparently till now. That was me.
Okay.
That's the demo I'm working on, that based upon Acme Air, written in Happy, and then to run inside of this Docker. But it doesn't have to run. Really, it should be seen as 2 different projects. One is a Happy.js kind of rewrite of Acme Air, and then the Couchbase Couchbase demo. That's an airline that does lots of complex REST queries, and then wrapping it inside of Docker, but they should be considered separate. And that's what I was saying, that if we want to have a second version that's written in Restify, fine with me.
Okay, yeah, I'm really, really interested in this. That's a lot of code. Okay, yeah, and that would be excellent to have.
Yeah.
So, I mean...
So that would... Yeah, I'm not part of the Happy team. My company uses Happy exclusively, so...
Okay. Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's great stuff. So that'll be very useful. So yeah, so far the community has responded very enthusiastically. I'd like to get feedback from everyone on what would be the best modules to go, like what they think the best modules would be, and then maybe if the list is really long, we can narrow it down to, well, these 2 modules are very similar. Maybe for now we can cut it down to just this one while we get everything implemented or whatever. But yeah, I feel like if we continue to reach out, that people will give us stuff to work with.
In terms of putting together that list, how do you want to do that? Like open a GitHub issue, let people comment, or do you have some other ideas?
Yeah, I'm not sure. GitHub issues would... The GitHub issue for that would get freakishly long very fast.
Okay.
Do we want to set up like a Slack or a Gitter or something?
Yeah, those would be great for communication.
Would it be helpful for us to just, like, maybe we could just sort of put forth the modules that we use really often and then sort of start from there? I mean, I assume that we all run pretty large instances of Node, and we have Node apps, so that might be a good starting point.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I thought that was actually what we were talking about, and yeah, I think that should be the first way we go. I think soliciting community feedback on what modules would get too overwhelming too quickly. Starting off with like our controlled group and just getting started would be much easier to implement, and then, I mean, even just getting frameworks like Happy and Kraken up doing some complex thing we can test is no trivial thing. I've tried more than once in the past, and every time I failed because it gets so big so quickly, right?
So does it make sense? And I could like send. I have everybody's contact email. I could send an email saying, "Hey, respond with your list." We could then take that and consolidate it and review it in a future meeting. Is that?
That sounds great. And then I think so. Yeah. And I don't know the best way, but some kind of document we can be constantly updating. Kind of, I don't know, just like a Google Doc or something like that, with specifics about each module. Yeah, that's the part I was saying where GitHub issues get very long very quickly, is when you start discussing specifics about things like that.
So how about just a spreadsheet then on Google Docs?
That's fine. That worked great.
Okay, so do we want to just fill it in? Like I could send out a link with the email saying, here's a Google Doc link, fill in, your module list, or do we want to try and, get a long list and pare it down to something smaller before we fill it in there? Is any preference?
No, let's just start throwing crap in. It's easy to highlight and delete.
Okay, so I'll set out the link with the Google Doc to do that in.
Awesome.
Okay, anything more on that issue?
Not for me.
No. Okay, that's good. The next one was discussion of, investigation. I was going to look at, getting Acme Air and seeing what the minimum setup configuration we needed to be able to put that into our builds. Unfortunately, I haven't had time to do that, so I'm going to roll that over to the next meeting. The next thing on the agenda is getting the first benchmarks running.
Yeah, so I threw that one on at the last second.
Yep, that's good. So you have the floor.
Thanks. It's basically, we're putting together awesome plans, but do we have any plans on just getting the minimal benchmarks running? Like, even if it's just the existing node benchmarks, do we have a plan of how to just get those running on a routine basis?
Right, I think it's a good point that just choosing something, like I would, on the Acme Air side, that's kind of the path I was going down, was to try just understand what we needed to do to run it, and then try and take the first steps to get that added in. If we have another set and other people who want to look at other ones, I think that's a good idea, because it's a good way to shake out the kind of issues we'll have. What do we need in terms of hardware, that kind of stuff.
I'd say the simplest set that makes sense, because I like getting hardware spun up and getting it scheduled to run routinely based on either the commit or the daily or the tag, right? Those are also non-trivial things to get set up. So I want the actual running the benchmarks to be as easy to get done as possible while that part is figured out.
Right. Now I wonder if there's some overlap with this in the build work group, because like some of the things you mentioned would intersect with the regular build, right?
Yeah, and like I can definitely ask Rod and see if he thinks, like, I don't think this would have much to do directly with Jenkins, but I don't know, hooking into a Jenkins API so that it can know, oh, hey, this happened, let's go ahead and run this thing, or maybe we can, subtopic of this would be like, when would we run like the minimal benchmarks, like, and when would we run the full benchmark suite? I see the full benchmark suite as like, okay, we've prepped this for release, it's ready to be shipped out. Okay, let's start running the full suite. But then somebody has a change they want to check the performance of.
Right.
we definitely don't want to be running the full suite on that. So here's the minimal set that you can be running it on.
Right.
So yeah, hook into the Jenkins API to allow users to run minimal set benchmarks for their pull requests.
Right, and I guess those, like, when you said it wouldn't necessarily be done in Jenkins, wouldn't we still use Jenkins to control starting and running them?
Oh, I have no idea the capabilities of Jenkins. All I know is that I put in some fields and it runs my tests for me.
I mean,
Yeah.
we could just use it as a job scheduler, which would be fine. Right? That's,
Exactly. You know, it can effectively runs whatever script, you know, Unix shell script kind of thing that you want. You know, often pulling the pieces, you know, can say check out the pieces for the benchmarks from GitHub somewhere and then trigger them. I think some of the trickier questions might be, again, do we have hardware, or how do we put in place hardware where we would get, you know, runs that you could use to compare against?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe when it first gets set up, we take the minimal set and then we just march it backwards in time, because like the gulp one works all the way back with V10, and what if we just did like every minor, I guess at that point everything was a patch release, but like put in an interval to build, right? And so we can go back and accumulate what it was back then, and so we have something to compare to today when we first start doing it.
Right. I guess we just gotta, as long as the machines we run it at are something we're going to be able to maintain as well, right? Because running them and then having the machines disappear would invalidate the results, right?
Yeah.
One of the
Go ahead, Chris.
Well, one of the interesting challenges we'll have, which the build work group doesn't have to the same degree, is we need to make sure that each round of the tests is run on the same spec hardware.
Yeah, we were just talking about this earlier. Maybe we could get one of the Node Foundation sponsors to, like Joint maybe, or some other folks who have cloud infrastructure to just reserve a set of instances so we can use. I think that would be great, because then we're ensuring we're using the same hardware, the same operating system, everything's so you don't have any of these fluctuations when you're being swapped all over the place on multiple cloud provider.
Yeah. Sorry. My only fear with that is, at least, I'm not sure what happens with the actual VM images with Joyent, but with Triton, what'll happen is if nobody's using additional resources, like let's say you've reserved a 2-processor Docker container, if nobody else is using anything in that physical hardware, you could have as many as 24 processors all of a sudden burst available to you. But I could ask what the deal is, or maybe Trevor knows better, what the deal is with actual, you know, VMs there. But do we know where this is the second question, but do we know where the build group stuff is running already? I mean, are they on static physical hardware, or are they getting allocated stuff resources as they need it?
On what platform? Like Rod has like literally a box of a cluster of Raspberry Pis sitting on his desk to do the builds.
Right. Okay. For a number of the other ones, though, I think are cloud-based, like DigitalOcean, I'm pretty sure, Rackspace, Joyent.
Yeah. And then is Microsoft? Yeah, I think Microsoft's hosting the Windows.
I know you can pretty much like reserve whoever their largest instances are with all these providers, and that basically gives you that entire box, right? And you don't have any other tenants on there, and then.
But I don't think that's necessarily the way these are set up, right? I think these are mostly donated, and I expect they're probably the ones where, you know, it will vary depending on the time and what else is running.
Well, so maybe we just need to ask if there's at least one of the build providers for the moment that can get us some sort of dedicated, you know, we know it's physical. Maybe it's that Raspberry Pi cluster, I don't know, but at least just try to get one running. And then we can look at, you know, what the other options are for, you know,
Even if it's like a spare Mac Pro that someone's got sitting on their desk, but that would be preferable to
No, no, you're actually not that far off. Mozilla, if you look at arewefastyet.com, when I worked there, like you just walk by and like, yeah, here's the box that we run all of our, Are We Fast Yet tests on. It looked like it was just somebody's computer that they repurposed into doing the benchmarks.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly donate like a desktop that I put under my desk that I'll give you guys SSH access to. Like that's something we could do. It's not a huge deal. It just depends on the scale in which we need to do benchmarking, right?
Right. So I'm thinking we should touch base with the build work group since they've had the most interaction with hardware. Make sure we, see what they say about this issue and if they have any suggestions. Otherwise, yeah, we could probably put together we'd like to do this. Who can donate hardware or like the computer. I know SoftLayer actually has dedicated instances, so we might be able to get something from there. So I guess I can get this on as an agenda item on the next build working group meeting just to see what kind of feedback we get.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. Yep. Michael, we should seriously look at SoftLayer because I know the way that they provision images means you can get a bare metal VM image, so you've got guaranteed network and CPU.
Yeah, well, exactly. That's what I was thinking. So if we say here's what we want to do, and I think it would be good to go back to anybody who might want to contribute. So the foundation members and say, hey, we're looking for this, and yeah, I think SoftLayer is a good candidate because they definitely have dedicated machines as one of your options. Okay, so maybe we'll get some build feedback. I'll open an issue to track it. We'll get it on the agenda, put whatever feedback we get from that onto the onto that issue so you can comment in the interim. And we'll have it on the agenda for next week or the next time we get together to talk about where we're at on that front.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. So I think we're at the end of the time and the end of the agenda. Are there any other things people wanted to add in? I guess if not, we'll call it a day, and I'll plan to schedule this again in, say, 2 or 3 weeks. Does that make sense for everybody?
That sounds good.
Yep.
Okay, and Corbin, do you want me to add you to the invitee list?
Sure. Sorry, I like this morning looked at the issue and realized that was an option at the top. I only looked at the lower. I saw the link and I went, oh, okay, I know when that is. And then
no problem. I just that way I'll include you in the doodles and all that kind of stuff. So.
No, sounds good.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thanks a lot. Talk to you guys all later.